Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday the 15th of November and this is Scotland at 7. I'm Andrew Wilson and this evening I'm hosting the programme from Edinburgh. First we will have today's coronavirus update, then I will introduce this evening's guest, and then we will look at today's news headlines from Scotland and around the world together. As of 2 p.m. today, since the start of the pandemic, a total of 3,532,021 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 2,846,206 have been confirmed negative, and 685,815 have tested positive. There are 2,288 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 771 were in hospital last night, 57 of whom were in intensive care. There are no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive, and that means that the number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection still stands at 9,389. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 4,330,321 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 3,929,012 had received their second dose. And the latest UK daily figures show that 142,945 patients who had tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, and that is an increase of 47 since yesterday. Remember, this number refers to deaths in all settings, not just in hospitals. Now, we're lucky enough to be joined this evening by a long-term friend and regular contributor, Chris McCusker. As you probably know, Chris is a carer, a campaigner, an activist, a member of the SNP's trades union group, and generally is known as Newton Mearn's answer to Nick Nairn. How are you doing this evening, Chris?
I'm absolutely brilliant, Andrew, and I'll always look forward to your introductions.
It's a pleasure, really, and it's all true. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you. And so our first story this evening is that the explosion outside a hospital in Liverpool that left one man dead and another seriously injured has been described as a terrorist incident by police, as the terror threat level in the UK was raised. Police said that following discussions with bomb disposal officers, the explosion was being treated as the ignition of an explosive device. A taxi burst into flames outside Liverpool Women's Hospital at 10:59 a.m. on Remembrance Sunday in dramatic scenes that were captured on video. Police later confirmed that a male passenger was declared dead at the scene, while the cab driver, who has been widely named in reports as David Perry from Kirkdale, managed to escape and has since been discharged from hospital. The threat level in the UK from terrorism was raised to severe on Monday, meaning that an attack is deemed highly likely. The decision, taken on Monday by the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, represents an upgrade of one notch from the previous threat level of substantial. The improvised explosive device had been manufactured, and the assumption is that it was built by the deceased passenger, according to early police findings, and while the motive is unclear, one line of inquiry is a possible link with remembrance events taking place nearby on Sunday. The Assistant Chief Constable Russ Jackson from the Counter-Terrorism Policing North West Unit told a press conference that police believed that they knew the identity of the passenger but could not confirm it at this time. 3 men aged 21, 26 and 29 were arrested on Sunday under the Terrorism Act, while a 4th man aged 20 was arrested today. ACC Jackson told the press conference that the taxi driver picked up a fare in Rutland Avenue, Liverpool, shortly before 11 a.m. on Sunday. The fare, a man, asked to be taken to the Liverpool Women's Hospital, which was about 10 minutes away. As the taxi approached the drop-off point at the front of the hospital, an explosion occurred from within the car, which quickly was engulfed in flames. The driver escaped from the cab and was treated for injuries he sustained, and later he was discharged from hospital. So, Chris, it's probably too early to say very much concrete about these events yesterday morning. However, it struck me in thinking about it that it's 14 years since the attack at Glasgow Airport, and yet there have been 2 terror attacks in England in slightly less than a month. So Scotland seems to have far fewer incidents like this. Is it because we're a smaller country, or is there something else going on, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't like to draw on that. You probably remember I was the trade union rep at Glasgow Airport, so I've got first-hand experience of that incident, so we can read into it in all manner of conclusions and whatnot, and what have you. I just think that whilst we're not really sure of the actual motive out of this. Yes, they've said that it is terror related, but I find the choosing of the hospital, Liverpool's a city I know very well. A former resident of the Socialist Republic of Liverpool. So I find it a really, really curious target, the Women's Hospital in Liverpool. So I'm really wondering why they chose that target. Maybe not, why didn't they choose John Lennon International Airport, or as it's commonly known, the Liverpudlian Speak Airport? I'm quite baffled as to why they chose that hospital to do it. Yes, I know that there's close links. I think it went off at 10:58 or something like that. So it was a couple of minutes before the bells to mark Remembrance Sunday. There are some tenuous links there, but I think it's early days to draw conclusions and comparisons and stuff like that. I would only just add the fact that, yes, it has been 14 years since Glasgow seen a terror attack such as that. Let's hope it's, at least another 14 years before we see the likes again.
Well, absolutely, Chris, and that was very much my point. It's been a very long. One is relieved in a sense that it's a very long time since there was last a terror attack in Scotland, and as you say, it's curious that the cab driver was apparently asked to drop his male passenger at Liverpool Women's Hospital. So it's clearly a line of inquiry that's drawn the attention of the police. But I was if you don't mind, I was reflecting also on the events in Glasgow 14 years ago, and I do recall that one of those who came to the aid or who ran towards trouble was a taxi driver, and he was famously on the front page of the tabloids in Scotland the following week, saying that he'd kicked one of the attackers so hard he broke his own foot. So do you think, is there something about taxi drivers or something about people that means that they are prepared to, that they are mobilised and that they run towards a problem to try and help rather than either freezing or running away?
Well, I'm glad that you didn't mention the gentleman mentioned Willie Sweetin. I have my own personal thoughts on him, but I think that people in public service have actually got a subconscious to, whilst they're carrying out their duties, servicing the public. I mean, this was a random taxi that was called in order to take up what the taxi driver obviously thought was a fairly innocuous fare, a journey of 10 minutes or something like that, I seem to recall. So I mean, it's not like it was the biggest fare of the day or anything like that. And I think he's obviously instinctively jumped out the car, as soon as the device had went off. and thankfully his injuries weren't bad enough to keep him in hospital for any length of time. So again, the police and the anti-terrorist squad will be able to glean vital information off of him in order to ascertain, what the events were in that 10 minutes. Because obviously he would have had a conversation with the passenger that he picked up, and he'd be asking him questions as to, why are you going to the women's hospital? Who are you visiting? Or is it a relative, or is it a friend? Yada yada yada. There might be an awful lot of lies, said in that conversation. I think, as you say, I think that people in a public service, sort of like status, I think they have it preconditioned in their mind, to be as proactive and reactionary to any given incident at any one given time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And I'm sure we'll come back to this story as the facts begin to emerge. But we'll move to Scottish politics now, because the SNP has said that Douglas Ross is guilty of stunning hypocrisy, after it emerged that the Scottish Tory leader has broken the rules on dozens of occasions by failing to declare thousands of pounds in outside earnings repeatedly over a period of 5 years. After investigations by the Herald and the Sunday Mail revealed that Mr. Ross failed to properly declare outside earnings from refereeing at least 42 football matches since 2017, Kirsten Oswald MP said that Douglas Ross is always quick to demand others resign for rule breaking, even when they haven't, but he now seems strangely reluctant to follow his own advice. On Saturday, the Herald revealed that Mr. Ross has broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare £28,218.57 in outside earnings from his second job as an MSP and his third job as a football linesman, including £6,728 from 16 football matches between 2020 and 2021. A separate investigation from the Sunday Mail later found that Mr. Ross had also broken the rules by failing to declare income on time from a further 26 football games since being elected. Commenting, the SNP's Westminster Deputy Leader, Kirsten Oswald MP, said, "Douglas Ross is guilty of stunning hypocrisy after being caught red-handed breaking the rules over outside earnings on dozens of occasions. This can't be explained away as a one-off error. Now it's clear the Scottish Tory leader is a repeat offender. Mr. Ross is always quick to demand that others resign for rule breaking, even when they haven't, but he now seems strangely reluctant to follow his own advice. As always, the Tories, it seems to be one rule for them and another for everyone else. People will find it staggering," she continued, "that Mr. Ross has voted to slash the incomes of the poorest in society through universal credit and other Tory cuts, while making thousands of pounds on the side and failing to declare it." So, Chris, is Kirsten Oswald right? Does Douglas Ross simply think that the rules don't apply to him like they do to the rest of us, or is there something else going on here?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to contradict my own MP. She is right, with on that regard. I would be careful about, any one, whether it's an SNP MP or whether it's a Labour MP or a Lib Dem. I'd be careful about, taking the moral high ground on this. But it has been proven time and time again that the Tories pay scant regard to due process when it comes down to making certain things known in public, and declaring various interests and whatnot, what have you. It's been well documented in the past that Tories are notorious for claiming back money for staples and ink in their offices and whatnot, what have you. But the point being, as and for me, it's more about the fact that he has 4 jobs, which really has got to ask a question as to how well does what I mean? What is his allegiances? Is it Scottish politics? Is it Scottish football? He's also an MP. I find it hard that he can represent his constituency and also represent the List region that he claims to represent. And how he can do that when he's running the line at a Scottish Football Premier League match, or even in a couple of cases. A couple of years ago, I think he missed an important debate in Westminster because he was running the line at a match in Barcelona.
European game, yeah.
So I think that MPs and MPs generally, MPs and MSPs, if they have a second job which benefits the community, such as a doctor or maybe a lawyer or something like that, or a fire person or somebody that works in the ambulance service, then that's absolutely fine. But when it's in order to boost your own bank account and you don't declare it, I think that is extremely naughty. And yes, he should fess up, and he should be treated exactly the same as any other person that has these jobs. Because bear in mind the fact that the Tories are well known in spending horrendous amounts of money investigating people who are actually on benefits, and very little money on people who are actually evading tax in the country. That study is well documented. So I think, yes, Kirsten's absolutely right in that regard, yeah.
Thanks, Chris. And we'll look at the ongoing torrent of Tory sleaze from another perspective now, because the SNP MP Pete Wishart has said that nothing short of a complete overhaul of the broken Westminster system can fix the Tory corruption scandal currently engulfing the UK government and Parliament. As MPs prepare to vote on standards later today, Pete Wishart MP said the growing scandal could not be blamed away on a few rotten apples or fixed with half-hearted apologies when sleaze and cronyism are endemic at Westminster and the problem leads all the way to the very top. The SNP shadow leader of the House of Commons said the Tory, Labour and Lib Dem Westminster establishment must accept wholesale reform, including a ban on cash for honours, the abolition of the House of Lords, curbs on second jobs, and stringent new rules on MPs' standards and the ministerial code. The SNP shadow leader of the House of Commons said, "A fish rots from the head down, and Boris Johnson is at the rotten core of a sleaze scandal that has engulfed Westminster, with dozens of Tory MPs implicated. People are horrified at what is going on at Westminster and think they're all at it. The only way for the Tories to save any last scraps of credibility is to accept fundamental change." So, Chris, firstly, is Pete Wishart right? And do you think, will the other Westminster parties, other than the Tories, do you think they'll agree with him?
Yes, he's right, but I have to take issue not taking issue directly with Pete Wishart, and he's perfectly entitled to say what he thinks. But we should be concentrating on the fact that that Scotland wants nothing to do with Westminster. My own personal opinion, this is obviously not the party opinion, nor for any of the groups that I'm involved in, but my own personal opinion is the fact that the SNP MPs should not be at Westminster, period. And that's just my own personal opinion on it. So therefore, I think Pete's arguments with regards to the House of Lords being disbanded. Well, if Scotland wants to be an independent country, then it doesn't matter whether the House of Lords stays, remains, or reforms, or whatever, because at the end of the day, we should be concentrating on Scotland being independent and, holding our own elected members of our parliament to public scrutiny and account. So from that point of view, yeah, listen, I don't think that you can reform Westminster, from the vile character that it has become in the last 100 years. There are always going to be self-entitled people in that house. There's always going to be people who are going to bend the rules in order to suit themselves. There's always going to be people who are going to be of the attitude that £80,000 is not enough to keep them going, and the lifestyle that they are accustomed to demands that they need to earn in excess of £360,000 every year. So they're always going to have their finger in the pie. And, I would much rather that our MPs had nothing to do with that whatsoever. And I'm not saying our MPs should be beyond reproach, but by the same token, it's their parliament. Let them get on with it. Let them deal with the nasty stink of sleaze that comes out of it. And, we should be, the way that we want our MPs and MSPs to be, not obviously without flaw or anything, but, we should set our own standards.
No, absolutely. I was reflecting on this myself when we were looking at the script earlier today, and I would think perhaps is it fair to say for Mr. Wishart that what he's trying to do is to show that as you say, Westminster cannot be reformed. It will not reform, not properly, and that the people of Scotland don't want the current Westminster setup, I'll put it in those terms, and so independent, as Pete just trying to demonstrate in his own way that independence is the only way that the people of Scotland can get away from the sort of House of Commons and House of Lords that he's described and that you described just now.
Yeah, I mean, in that respect, he's 100% correct. And I think that when Scotland does eventually become independent, we would need some sort of upper chamber. But I would argue the fact that upper chamber should be elected. They should be made up of ordinary citizens, who wish to contribute and give the benefit of their own experience. I mean, we've got. I would say that we've got a pretty good lid on the likes of wages and stuff like that, and for what an MSP or an elected member of Parliament can earn in Scotland, and in some regards, it's been documented as well that certain people have donated their salary rises to charitable causes and stuff like that. Purely because they don't want to be seen to be shall we say, ripping the mince at it. So, from that side of the coin, I think an awful lot of Scottish people do view our political setup as being, slightly cleaner than Westminster. I'm not saying it's entirely clean, but we do set ourselves a different standard, and I think Pete's quite right to highlight the woeful inequality that runs right the way through Westminster like a knife runs through butter, because no matter, and we're not talking about sides of the house here. As obviously a socialist, I can't square in my head why they have a Knight of the Realm heading up the opposition. That to me just is it's I just can't square that circle. And then there's people on the front bench of Labour and whatnot, what have you. They've got their wee fingers and allegedly several pies. Whatnot, what have you. There's the whole thing about the 7-course banquet meals and nah, that's not Scotland,
Of course. Thanks, Chris. Now we'll move away from politics for a moment, because the latest advice from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, the JCVI, has recommended offering booster jags to those aged 40 to 49 and second doses for those aged 16 and 17. Scotland's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Gregor Smith, announced earlier today. Dr. Smith said that the JCVI has advised that people aged 40 to 49 will now be eligible for a COVID-19 booster. These will be offered once the earlier agreed priority groups have had their booster injections to ensure that the most vulnerable groups are offered protection first. The 40 to 49-year-old group will soon be able to book their own appointments through the NHS online portal, which is now live for 50 to 59-year-olds. The announcement also recommends that young people aged 16 and 17 years old are now eligible for a second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine following the most recent JCVI advice. So, Chris, for a moment there, I was thinking you might fit into the 16 and 17-year-old bracket, but then that's maybe not. That's unlikely. So I think you may be in one of the other brackets, perhaps a bit like me. So, just out of interest, Chris, where are you on your own journey to be jagged?
Thankfully, to the Scottish Government as an unpaid carer, I've got both vaccines. So I'm double jagged at the moment, and I'm eagerly awaiting my flu jab. I actually got the letter in this morning inviting me to make an appointment as an unpaid carer to get the winter flu jag. So, from that point of view, I'm quite happy. Obviously, my elder brother is a couple of weeks before me, because he's in the vulnerable grouping. So, yeah, I'm really happy that the Scottish Government are being proactive on this. I think everybody else should be happy about that. And actually, it coincides with the fact that for the first time in a long time, well, the first time in a good couple of years, I've actually been invited out to a social function. Yes, I have friends, so I just thought I'd put that in. But my son's actually graduating from Strathclyde University, and they're having a face-to-face graduation, and I was unable to go to his graduation at Aberdeen because obviously, it was all kiboshed up there, and so yeah, and I went onto the website to try and download my QR code and whatnot, my have you, and so I got all that sorted out and whatnot, my have you. So yeah, it's a good thing, and I would encourage everybody to sort of like sign up for it and get it sorted.
Of course. Now, earlier today, another good friend of the programme, Professor John Robertson, was retweeting the numbers and proportions of the populations in the constituent parts of the UK who have been vaccinated, and analysing those numbers according to age. And it won't surprise you to know that what Professor Robertson was retweeting showed that for the older age groups in Scotland, they're all now at 100% vaccinated with the first vaccine, and the very oldest groups are all now 100% vaccinated with their second jag. But at the other end of the age scale, levels of vaccination are at their lowest in Scotland amongst the youngest people. So what do you think we should be doing to encourage an increased uptake of the vaccinations amongst our younger people in our communities?
I think we have to. I think we have to give them a wee bit more information. I think we have to counter an awful lot of the negative chat surrounding vaccines and stuff like that. I believe, because I've got Kieran's 27 and Scott's 25, and they are anecdotally telling me that it's a kind of like a devil may care attitude within that, sort of like younger age group of. I mean, I remember when I was sort of like 20, 23, I thought I was invincible.
Yep.
And you largely do, and you're very, very sort of like devil may care and whatnot, what have you, very cavalier in attitude. But I think if again, not bombard them, but coerce them in order for them to do a wee bit more research, into the benefits of it. And I'm talking not necessarily just the medical benefits, but, point out to them the fact that, if they don't have these JAGs, or if they make the conscious decision not to have these JAGs, then they can pretty much put a kibosh on a week in Torremolinos or, a week in Zakynthos. And that actually could turn an awful lot of heads. I mean, if you turn around to your average 18 to 23-year-old and say, by the way, if you don't get a Jag, you won't get into the garage on Saturday night. There'll be quite a lot of them will be going like that. I much fancy having a night on the bev.
Well, that's a good point, Chris, and we'll come back to that aspect in a story later on, I think, this evening. But what we'll do is we'll move on to the next story at the moment, which is that Steve Bannon, a longtime ally of former ex-President Donald Trump, turned himself in to an FBI field office in Washington today after being charged with contempt of Congress. The 67-year-old was taken into custody and is expected to appear in a district court later today. The former White House chief strategist was indicted on Friday after defying a subpoena from the House committee investigating the deadly attack on the US Capitol on the 6th of January by Trump supporters seeking to overturn the election. Bannon faces 2 counts of criminal contempt, one for refusing to appear for a congressional deposition and the other for refusing to provide documents in response to the committee's subpoena. Each count carries between 30 days and a year in jail. The indictment is the first for criminal contempt of Congress in nearly 4 decades. Bannon, a former executive chairman of Breitbart News, pushed false conspiracy theories about the 2020 presidential election. And on the 5th of January, he prophesied on his podcast, "All hell is going to break loose tomorrow." That evening, he was part of a gathering of Trump allies at the Willard Hotel in Washington that the House of Representatives committee has called a war room. Bannon refused to cooperate with the committee by citing an assertion of executive privilege by Trump. Legal experts argue that this is little standing, given that Bannon was a private citizen at the time of the insurrection. And last month, last month the House voted 229 to 202 to hold him in contempt. So, Chris, first of all, is Bannon for the big hoose, the Bar L?
Oh, let's hope so, because although you cited his association with a certain ex-president, we also have to remember his association with the British establishment, such as Nigel Farage and, your man that went up the motorway to Barnard Castle and all the rest of it. Yep. His name completely escapes me now. Dominic Cummings, yeah. His whole involvement in, because at the end of the day, he was manufacturing, I would say, that he was manufacturing the American side of the Brexit vote, obviously for Trump's benefit, more than anything. So, again, we go back to people having their fingers in the pies, and there's, as you know, there's establishments in British politics as well as the establishment in American politics. So, and I mean, Bannon is not as white on either side of the pond.
Of course.
So it's long overdue that the long arm of the law actually finally catches up with him.
Good. Well, we'll follow that story closely. Meanwhile, in Europe, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia have today accused Belarus of forcing migrants to breach its borders with the European Union and have demanded that the government of Alexander Lukashenko must be held accountable for human trafficking. In Brussels today, the European Union has agreed on new sanctions against Belarus, targeting everyone involved in facilitating the transport of people to Belarus's border with Poland, where thousands are now stuck in makeshift camps in freezing weather. The EU accuses Lukashenko's regime of waging a hybrid attack against the EU by allowing people from the Middle East who are desperate to reach the EU to fly into Minsk and then transport them to the Polish border. Josep Borrell, the EU foreign policy chief, said the decision by 27 EU foreign ministers reflected the determination by the European Union to stand up to the instrumentalisation of migrants for political purposes. A list of people and entities to be hit by asset freezes and travel bans is expected to be finalised in the coming weeks. It will include people, airlines, travel agencies, and everyone involved in this illegal push of migrants against our borders, Borrell said. The decision was announced as a column of people converged on the Polish border for the second week running. Meanwhile, NATO's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg warned Russia on Monday that the Western military alliance was standing by Ukraine amid a large and unusual concentration of Russian troops on Ukraine's borders. Stressing that the important thing now was to prevent situations from spiralling out of control, Stoltenberg urged Russia to be transparent about military activities, to reduce tensions, and to prevent an escalation. Russian troop movements have over the past days spurred fears of a possible attack. Moscow has dismissed such suggestions as inflammatory and complained about increasing activity in the region by the NATO Transatlantic Alliance. So, Chris, Lukashenko has appeared to be prepared to do pretty much anything up till now. So, do you think, is he going to be tamed by sanctions from the EU and perhaps from elsewhere?
No, I don't think it will. Sadly, I really don't think it will. And it's bad enough to for any country to create migrants on the back of war. It's my English will be terrible here grammatically, but it's doubly bad to create migrants for your own personal gain. And this is exactly what Lukashenko is doing. He is victimizing people for his own ends. One of the important words that you used there was transparency, with regard to Russia. The last thing that Russia wants to do, wants to appear as being transparent, because, to my mind, I think that Russia is just pulling Lukashenko's strings. Russia is the puppeteer, and Lukashenko is the puppet. And this is imposing on people, humans who have done no wrong. They have not created this, by their own actions, and they're being used by a despot to try and sort of like, love me, it's not my fault routine. This has been forced upon me because the European community aren't doing what I want them to do. I've got 100% solidarity, obviously, for the migrants that have been created. I've also got 100% solidarity for, the stance that Europe are taking. And and funnily enough, I had a conversation with my son about this, and as much as I love Poland, and its wonderful citizens, unfortunately, their government is less than sympathetic, with regards, sort of like, shall we say, inward migration being forced upon them. You only need to look back at the last election to see their attitude towards people that have LGBT rights. So it's going to create a bottleneck. We've already seen bottlenecks created in Greece and all the rest of it. I know from my own personal experiences, I've seen, the bottleneck firsthand at the jungle in Cali and at the satellite camp at Sangat. And it gets to the point where people they have gone as far as they can go and they can't go any further.
Absolutely.
And that's when desperation sets in. That's when poor health conditions set in. That's when malnutrition kicks in. That's when people start doing desperate things. That's when you see a lot of heavy armed force to try and contain people who are, already exacerbated by the problem that they didn't cause. And something has to give. And, I just sincerely hope it doesn't end up in a real humanitarian disaster.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. If you've got your refugee hoodie on this evening, if we've got time, we'll come back and talk to you about that. We've got a few more stories we need to cover, so we'll move on just now.
Yeah.
But we'll if we can get time at the end of the program, we'll certainly get an update from you from the work that's going on just now. But first of all, we're going to return to the coronavirus, because Austria has today imposed a lockdown on people who are unvaccinated against COVID-19. With winter approaching and infections rising across Europe, Austria's Conservative-led government said that about 2 million people in the country, of roughly 9 million, were now only allowed to leave their homes for a limited number of reasons, like travelling to work or shopping for essentials. There is widespread scepticism about how the lockdown can be enforced, as it could be hard to verify whether someone is on their way to work, which is allowed, or going to shop for non-essential items, which is not. The aim of the lockdown is to counter a surge in infections, which is to record levels, fueled by a full vaccination rate of only around 65% of the Austrian population. That's one of the lowest in Western Europe. So, Chris, earlier this evening, you were kind enough to talk a little bit about your own jaggy journey, and you were also talking about the position of young people. So how do you think young people, or how would you feel if you were unvaccinated and then found that you were curfewed as a result?
I would feel hellish. I would feel that it was unfair and it was unjust. They have obviously worked out some sort of system where I would like to think that people, from various health reasons, are not able to be vaccinated, that they will obviously be factored into this equation. But it's got. I hate to say this, and I might get smacked down for it, but it's got echoes of Nazi Germany here, where where people are under curfew and not allowed out. You get to the point where you're actually marking citizens to say that you're fit for society, and other citizens are not. That is a rocky road to go down, and I would guard against any of those kind of draconian sanctions on your own citizens.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks.
From that point of view, don't get me wrong. I'm nobody to lecture Austria or any other government and whatnot, what have you. But I can only draw my own conclusions that I certainly wouldn't want to be treated that in that shape or fashion. And with the same respect, I think actually people who are eligible to wander around at liberty, I would like to think that they might actually think about those who are not able to walk around at liberty. But then again, that's the socialist in me and stuff like that. So,
of course. Thanks, Chris. Now then, we're going to move to our next story, which is that a consultation has been launched on how custody is used as part of the criminal justice system, and how support can be given to better help people move on from their offending behaviour within communities, whilst ensuring public protection and victim safety remain at the centre of the process. proposals aimed at reducing the undue disruption caused by short periods of imprisonment on remand, providing more opportunities for rehabilitation, and better supporting reintegration for people leaving prison will also be considered. The responses to the consultation will inform legislation, with a bill scheduled for introduction in the first year of this Parliament. The proposals within the consultation recognise that while imprisonment will always be needed for those who pose a risk of serious harm, many people in contact with the criminal justice system experience multiple and severe disadvantage. A greater emphasis on rehabilitation and reintegration will do more to support people to move away from reoffending behaviour. So, Chris, we know that levels of crime have continued to drop in Scotland, and violent crime is at historically low levels. So is it that change which is now driving the move to revisit the bail and remand systems because there are fewer violent criminals in our communities, full stop?
Well, I wouldn't cite any one given sort of like instance. I think that as you rightly point out, that violent crime is definitely on the decrease within Scotland. There could be various factors to that, and I could allude to a few in my own mind, but they would only be my own personal opinion. But I think if Scotland takes a more holistic approach towards, possibly even reoffending, and the whole ethos around rehabilitation, getting people involved with more community work. And I'm not talking about chain gangs here or anything like that, but I'm a firm believer of people, paying back into the community. And I think, when people see, the community benefiting, then I think that they, possibly think twice about, following that line of, life. But the overarching thing is that obviously there is a burden in society in Scotland that have got other issues that lead them into that circle of the likes of judicial review and the chance of rehabilitation and stuff like that. And I think that if we tackle the underlying problems that lead people into that system, before they get there, then obviously that would alleviate an awful lot of problems, further down the line. So, I think what the whole ethos, thoughts on socialism are well documented, but I think if other communities, benefit from the redistribution of wealth, it would maybe allow people not to take the proverbial mickey out of the system in the first place, which would then not tempt them into pursuing a life of criminality, and therefore alleviating the problem.
Absolutely, thanks, Chris. Bear in mind, this consultation's to do with the conditions in the system for bail and remand. So people haven't been convicted at this point. These are people who are being processed before trial. But undoubtedly, we'll return to this, and also, as you say, the underlying deeper social reasons, which are often very closely associated with why people end up in the criminal justice system. You're absolutely right. But we'll move on to our next story this evening, which is that funding of £7 million will improve GP surgeries, expanding the level of care to patients across Scotland. Vacant high street units will be taken over by integration authorities to expand the primary care estate, with the funding also used to support GP practices, including digitising records to free up more space. The Scottish Government has set aside £5 million from the Primary Care Fund to make improvements to existing GP premises, An additional £2 million will obtain new sites to accommodate multidisciplinary teams, including those administering vaccines, mental health nurses, and audiology specialists. The Health Secretary Humza Yousaf said, GP surgeries provide a wide range of services supporting both the physical and mental health of patients, so it's vital that they get the space they need to allow primary care multidisciplinary teams to do their jobs. The £5 million from the Primary Care Fund will cover premises improvement grants to GP contractors who own or lease from private landlords, digitisation of paper records to release space, improve ventilation, and increase space in NHS-owned or leased premises to support multidisciplinary teams. The Scottish Government will monitor how health boards spend the further £2 million to acquire vacant high street units to inform how the £10 billion available for capital investment in healthcare supports primary care. So, Chris, this sounds to me like an interesting development. We know that the retail on the high street is shrinking fast, and that the market for offices has also shrunk dramatically during the pandemic. So are we going to see the SNHS, Scotland's NHS, start to be a greater feature on our high streets?
One would hope so, in order to make the NHS a wee bit more accessible. But, I mean, at this moment in time, you can pop along to your local chemist, and many of the chemists offer a minor treatment service. Such as cuts and burns and abrasions and whatnot, what have you, and they can offer advice on that, right down to chilblains in your toes and stuff like that. So, I think that as well should be advanced, and if chemists are allowed to expand, if there's a vacant premises next to an existing chemist, then by all means, make some money available for them in order to let them expand a bit and give the customer more room, provide more service for the customer. That would be ideal. But again, I mean, doctors at this moment in time, doctor surgeries need this investment in order to keep going, because they have been under immense pressure, and it is excellent to hear that Scotland has actually been proactive in looking after our doctors and the people that work within the doctor practices as well. And it's obviously digitalization is the way to go. If you remember walking into a doctor's surgery years ago, and there was just walls and walls and walls of paper records and whatnot, what have you, taking up space. I mean, if that can free up another room, then fair play,
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Now we've got a minute and a half, and so we should maybe return to the story the story that we touched on from the border between Belarus and Poland, and the plight of the refugees who find themselves now trapped between lines of Polish soldiers and Belarusian soldiers. Now, you've got your refugee hoodie on this evening. Can you give us a 90-second update about the work in Eastwood that you've been doing over the past 2 or 3 weeks since you and I last spoke?
Yeah, I've had 90-second update. Oh, God. Right, well, we've had a very successful crowdfunder, and we're working through the onerous amounts of grateful donations that the good people of East Renfrewshire and Glasgow have saw fit to donate to us in order to support predominantly Afghan families who are coming to Scotland under the UK government resettlement scheme. Unfortunately, because the UK government are in charge of it, we've got no hard, fast, concrete facts as to how many are coming, where they are going, what authority are going to get, how many families and whatnot, what have you. Scotland has just been left in the dark. Mushroom syndrome, fed in the dark and fed a load of you know what. So from that point of view, we are not just helping Afghan asylum seekers, migrants, refugees, but we're also helping people who are already here, whether they be Syrian, whether they be Eritrean, whether they be from Bangladesh, or, so we're trying to work in partnership with Refugee, although I'm not part of Refugee. My group is called Eastwood Refugee Aid, and we operate out of our own premises that we've secured from gratefully from East Renfrewshire Council at 60 Busby Road, and we, as exactly as it's described, as a collection and distribution hub, and our mission is to help any families in any authority in Scotland who, if they wish to get in touch with us and are looking for some warm clothing, even more practical things such as the likes of, a heater, a toaster, whatever they don't have, obviously within reason, then, we'll definitely endeavour to try and help them out. There's some families in some local authority areas, some families will be going into private accommodation, which is already fully furnished, whatnot, what have you. But again, these families that are coming over to Britain, they have no access to the public recourse of funds. Many of them are meant to survive on £7.35 a day. And that's a hell of a budget if you're trying to feed a family. So we do offer practical stuff like food, and as I say, kitchen utensils and all the rest of it in order to make sure that you're fed, warm, and we can go out and buy heaters and whatnot and what have you. And again, it's not just. Although we are the refugee group, but we would be more than happy to help any person who is homeless over Christmas. If anyone chaps our door looking for a coat or a jumper, or even just a cup of tea, they're more than welcome to chap our door at 60 Busby Road. I sound like an American car salesman. 60 Busby Road, get on down there.
No, I got the address. That's the important thing.
We are not marginalising homeless people in Glasgow. We're not marginalising veterans in Glasgow. If anybody has got any living needs in any such way, shape or form that they think that we could possibly help out with, practical, the likes of clothing and blankets and heating, all the rest of it, then please get in touch.
Thanks, Chris. And now, after that update from Chris, that was the final item for this evening's programme. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the financial support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. If you would like to support us financially, and we really need that support, then please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work, and if you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. Meantime, we will be here again tomorrow evening with Scotland at 7, so please join us then. I'd like to say many thanks to Chris and to everyone else for joining us here this evening. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no, an absolute pleasure once again, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And so that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 8. Please keep warm and keep well. Bye-bye.